My name is Margot Ashworth, and I'm 29 years old. Tonight I wore my favorite navy dress, curled my hair with deliberate care, and stepped into my father's retirement celebration telling myself one last time that maybe this could feel different. The ballroom was flawless in the way money makes flawless. Crystal chandeliers cast their glow across gold-rimmed glasses and carefully curated smiles. My husband Marcus walked beside me, hand in mine. I held tighter than I meant to. The shift in energy was immediate. Polite nods, lingering glances, whispers that never quite formed complete words. Olivia was radiant in white. James was loud and charming, the golden children. Me, I was the shadow they'd all learned to leave behind. But nothing could have prepared me for what my father would say tonight. Has your family ever humiliated you in public? Comment below, because I know I'm not alone. Before we get started, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Leave a comment and let's dive in. We sat near the back. The table numbers didn't matter much anymore. I focused on the clink of silverware, the jazz trio playing something soft and forgotten. My palms were damp, the speeches began. Toasts. Anecdotes, all carefully polished. My father took the stage. Edmund Harrington, former CEO, beloved mentor. Family man, if you believe the narrative he'd spent decades building. I've built companies, he said, but nothing compares to building a family I'm proud of. My throat tightened. James, he continued, his voice warm. Your brilliance in finance, your leadership, it inspires me daily. Applause. Then he turned to Olivia, your work with children, your sacrifice. You honor our name. More applause. Some guests even stood, and then his gaze found me. The smile vanished. His voice, sharp and calm, cut through the noise. You may leave now, Margot. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The silence afterward was louder than any microphone. Eyes turned. Forks hovered midair. Chairs stilled. Finn froze. I sat rigid, heart pounding in my throat. I waited for a laugh. A smirk. Something to undo it. Nothing came. This wasn't a slip. It was a declaration. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I sat still, spine straight. Marcus reached for my hand beneath the table. I laced my fingers through his. He could erase me from his narrative, but I was done erasing myself. Some memories sharpen over time, like glass ground into skin. I was 12 the first time I truly understood what I meant to my father. The spring recital. I'd practiced for nearly 2 months, my fingers aching most nights. I believed naively that if I played perfectly, he'd finally see me. Really see me. My mother curled my hair that morning. She pinned a silver clip behind my ear and said I looked like a young lady. I wore my blue dress, the one with the ribbon at the waist. Edmund sat in the front row, arms folded. Olivia whispered to James, who laughed. When it was my turn, I walked to the piano with trembling hands. One wrong note, one single mistake. The melody faltered like falling downstairs. I looked up. My father didn't flinch. He just stood and walked out. No expression, no explanation. Just the back of his coat disappearing down the aisle. Something inside me collapsed, but I finished the song somehow. Later that night, he never mentioned it. He asked Olivia about her science fair. He praised James's test scores. He told me to pass the butter. That's how he punished me. Not through anger. Through absence. It wasn't just one night. It was a pattern. By 16, I'd stopped telling him anything. It didn't seem to matter. When you live long enough in silence, you start believing you're the problem. You start thinking, maybe I'm just not worth noticing. I loved words. I devoured novels. I journaled obsessively. My English teacher once told me, "You think like a writer, Margot." That sentence lived in my chest for weeks. The day I got accepted into a regional creative writing scheme, I cried. They'd selected only 20 students. I'd poured everything into that application. That night I printed the acceptance letter and brought it to dinner. Edmund didn't look up from his plate. Creative writing? What do you plan to do with that? Write greeting cards? Olivia laughed. James smirked. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I mumbled something about developing my voice, exploring narrative. He cut me off. You need structure in your future, not in your fairy tales. Focus on something useful. That word haunted me from then on. Every time I read a book, I heard his voice. Every time I wrote something I loved, it felt like a guilty pleasure. So I dropped my literature elective. I picked up economics. I molded myself into someone I thought he could love. But nothing changed. Straight A's in classes I hated were met with silence. After a perfect semester, he simply said, "Scarlett's GPA is higher." That's when shame turned into quiet rage. The kind that settles deep and makes a silent promise. One day you'll wish you'd seen me. I chose communications at university as a compromise. Just enough creativity to keep me sane. Just enough structure to silence his scoff. I graduated quietly. No honors. Just a missed voicemail from Edmund. By 25, I had a job in publishing. Entry level, low pay. But I was reading, editing, touching books. I felt alive again. That's when Lighthouse Press was born. It started small, a blog. Then a digital magazine. Then a tiny team of writers and artists who believed like I did that stories could heal people. I worked nights. I saved every spare pound. I sold clothes just to keep the servers running. 3 years in, we signed our first distribution deal. I was buzzing with adrenaline. I called Edmund, voicemail. When he finally called back 3 days later, I told him the news. "Are you still doing that online book thing?" he asked. "That online book thing is a publishing deal," I said, my voice trembling. "Well, I suppose that's something's." "No congratulations." "No, I'm proud of you." Just a vague shrug over the phone. But it wasn't just about work. When Mum got sick, I was the one who took her to appointments. I drove her to chemotherapy. I stayed up at night when the nausea got unbearable. Olivia lived 2 cities away. James was busy. Edmund came to one appointment, stayed 15 minutes, and left with an excuse about meetings. And yet when relatives asked how Mum was, Edmund would say, "Olivia calls her when she can." Or, "James is trying to visit this month," as if I didn't exist. At 28, I stopped calling. Not out of spite, out of exhaustion. There's a different kind of grief when you realize your parent isn't capable of loving you the way you need. It doesn't feel like heartbreak. It feels like gravity. I still sent birthday cards. I still picked up when he called. But I stopped reaching for approval. One night, Edmund texted, "Congrats on the baby shower. We didn't have children. Olivia did. He'd gotten us confused." That was the moment I stopped trying to be his daughter in the way he demanded. Moving out wasn't dramatic. I just packed my life into boxes and left. Edmund didn't ask where I was going. Olivia didn't offer to help. James texted a thumbs up emoji and a meme about moving being freedom disguised as stress. Marcus rented the van. He brought sandwiches. He labeled every box. He didn't ask why I wasn't crying, because he already knew. The flat I moved into sat above a small shop, creaky floorboards, a heater that clanged like an old man cursing the cold. But it was mine. My name on the lease. My books stacked in crooked piles. For the first time in my adult life, I could breathe. But freedom comes with fine print. It reads, "You'll feel lonelier than ever." Lighthouse Press became my anchor and my burden. I worked 2 side jobs just to keep it alive. Edited thesis papers during the day. Stocked books at an independent shop until midnight. On weekends, I met with authors at cafes, pitching the impossible. Trust me, I have no office, no funding, but I have vision. Sometimes they said yes. Mostly they said no. One week I had £17 in my account and 4 days until rent. That night I sat on the kitchen floor with a frozen bag of peas as dinner, scrolling through job boards. A thought slipped in. Quiet lethal. Maybe he was right. Maybe this dream is foolish. I hated how much that voice sounded like Edmund. Marcus came out sleepy-eyed and sat beside me. "You're not crazy for wanting this. You're brave," in that one sentence. I felt more seen than I had in my entire childhood. It happened on a Tuesday. The email was brief. "We regret to inform you that due to budget restructuring, our partnership with Lighthouse Press will be suspended effective immediately." I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, hoping it would change. 21,376. That's what our account showed. Then 2 invoices went unpaid. 1 manuscript had to be shelved. The website hosting bounced. 3 nights later, I collapsed in the shower. Marcus found me curled on the bathroom floor, water still running. He didn't speak. He just wrapped me in a towel and held me until I stopped shaking. The next morning, he said quietly, "Harper, you don't have to carry this alone. It's my company." "My failure," I whispered. "No," he said. "It's our life. Your dream doesn't mean you're alone in it." That same day, a message arrived from Sophie Blackwell, one of the first authors I'd ever published years ago. She had gone on to publish with a bigger house. "I heard about the pullout. I'm so sorry. I believe in what you built. If you want to collaborate again, count me in." Then Thomas, owner of the bookshop where I'd worked part-time, texted, "I have a poet here. Young, talented. Doesn't trust big publishers. You should talk to her." Within a week, I was meeting this young writer at a cafe. Her name was Naomi, 21, fierce, unpolished. "I read what Lighthouse used to post," she said. It didn't feel fake. I walked home that night with her manuscript and something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope the healing didn't come suddenly. It came in whispers. in gestures, in people who showed up without asking for anything. Marcus became my anchor. Not the dramatic sweep you off your feet kind, but the steady stay through the mess kind. He never tried to fix me. He simply stayed. One night I told him everything. The recital, the silence. The time Edmund confused me with Olivia. Marcus held my face in his hands. You are not hard to love. You were just born into a place that didn't know how. That sentence stayed with me. Naomi turned out to be exactly what Lighthouse needed. We worked on her collection for 6 weeks. When the book launched, small scale, self-distributed, it sold out in 4 days. She sent me a voice message. Harper, I didn't think I'd ever trust someone in publishing. Thank you for not making me shrink. I saved that message. Thomas hosted a tiny reading night at his bookshop. No budget. Just folding chairs, paperbacks, and warm light. Sophie showed up. She hugged me like we were sisters and introduced me as the editor who gave her her first shot. That night, looking around the bookshop at the smiles and quiet laughter, I felt something unfamiliar, belonging. Not the kind you beg for. The kind you build with people who choose you, not for what you achieve, but for who you are. I was no longer invisible. I was seen, I was valued, I was loved. Not because I performed, but because I simply existed. Lighthouse Press grew slowly, quietly, steadily. Naomi's collection sold out again, then again. More writers asked to submit. The inbox began to feel like a door being knocked on by voices ready to be heard. The letters from readers kept coming. One was from a woman in her 60s who said Naomi's poem made her cry for the first time in 20 years. Another from a non-binary teenager. Your press made me feel like someone out there doesn't want me to hide. I printed that one out and taped it to the wall. Not for inspiration. For proof that I was enough. That spring, Marcus and I moved to Leeds. Not dramatic. Just a quiet decision made on a rainy Tuesday after lunch. Our new place had creaky floorboards and old tile in the kitchen, but it felt like home within days. Plants on the windowsills. Books stacked on every surface. Laughter echoing in the hallway. No ghosts, just life. Lighthouse found a new rhythm. Smaller, steadier, more intentional. I stopped chasing numbers and started chasing meaning. We published a children's book by a local queer artist. We hosted community writing circles in parks. I spoke at a library event, not about success, but about starting anyway. My relationship with Marcus deepened in ways I hadn't expected. We cooked together, painted walls, laughed in the middle of arguments because neither of us could stay mad for long. We reconnected with James slowly. He sent a message, then an apology, then a conversation. Not perfect reconciliation, but real effort. It mattered. We visited Margaret, my aunt, once a month. She made cinnamon rolls and told stories I'd never heard about my mum. About how brave she'd been before illness dulled her light. One afternoon, Margaret said, I don't excuse Edmund, but I understand why he broke. The problem is, he never tried to put himself back together. That stayed with me. Healing didn't come with candles and soft music. It came with silence I didn't know what to do with. It came when the adrenaline wore off. I started therapy. Rachel, my therapist, had kind eyes and the kind of silence that made you want to fill it. Over time, the layers started peeling. We talked about the recital, the birthdays, the times I laughed too quickly, agreed too easily, apologized for things I didn't do. Who taught you that? She asked once. We both knew the answer. Some sessions hurt more than expected. But I went because healing isn't soft. It's surgical. I began writing again, but not to publish. I wrote letters I never sent to Edmund, to Olivia, even to the version of me at 12 who froze on that piano bench. I started reading aloud affirmations I didn't yet believe. I'm allowed to take up space. I don't need to be useful to be loved. I'm not broken. I'm rebuilding. Eventually, it felt like truth. I didn't forgive Edmund, but I let go of the rope I'd been pulling for years, the one that kept me tethered to hope that he might change. Closure didn't live in his hands anymore. It lived in mine. It was a Tuesday when I wasn't trying to be brave. No emotional armor, just a regular day. Marcus had a checkup at a nearby clinic, and I waited at the hospital cafe with a book and mediocre coffee. I was halfway through a novel when I looked up and time paused. Edmund. He stood near the reception counter, holding a folder. His hair was thinner, more silver than I remembered. His shoulders sloped slightly. His once commanding posture had softened into something human. There was no panic, no anger. Just a stillness, a quiet acknowledgement. There you are, and I'm not afraid anymore. He didn't see me right away. When he did, his eyes widened just slightly. There was no nod, no expression. Just a flicker of recognition. I held his gaze for 2 seconds. Then I looked down, turned the page of my book, and took a sip of my coffee. Not out of pettiness, but because I had nothing left to say. I no longer lived in his orbit. He didn't approach me, didn't call my name, didn't linger. After a moment, he turned and walked away into the hallway, and just like that, it was over. No tears, no shaking hands, just peace. When Marcus returned, I told him. He studied my face. "Are you okay?" I smiled. I thought I'd feel something. I didn't. Not even anger. That's not nothing, Margot. That's healing. That night I lit a single candle on the windowsill. Not for Edmund, not for grief, but for the part of me that used to ache for his attention. The girl who rewrote poems hoping he'd read them, who played piano with bleeding fingers just for a nod. She was gone. In her place was a woman who had nothing to prove to him, to anyone. Not anymore. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived on a Tuesday. The envelope was cream-colored, thick. Inside was a note from a nurse. "Mr. Edmund Harrington passed peacefully last week. We found this card in his wallet." I sat on the porch steps for a long time. Inside the wallet was my first published article. Folded in quarters, edges softened by time, just that. No note, no explanation. But he'd kept it. All these years he'd kept it. I didn't cry. I just sat there, thinking. Then I got up and went back to the garden. There was lavender to plant. There was life to build. Lighthouse launched a mentorship program. Marcus and I started talking about adopting. Naomi published her second book. Thomas got engaged. I stopped trying to understand Edmund. I released him. And in releasing him, I released myself from the weight I'd carried so long. I'd mistaken it for part of my body. I didn't escape my past. I outgrew it. Healing didn't look like victory. It didn't come with trumpets or apologies or tearful reunions. It came in ordinary ways. A text I didn't send. A dinner I didn't dread. A boundary I held without shaking. A morning I woke up and didn't feel broken. That was enough. If this story felt like a mirror, if you've ever been overlooked or made to feel like you had to earn love, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments, what was the moment you finally chose yourself? Or are you still searching for it? Your voice matters here, and if no one ever told you before, you are already enough. Hit like if this story stayed with you. Subscribe for more stories that speak to the strength behind soft hearts.